Hi, I'm Iris Bowling.
And I'm Midnight Ace.
I'm Cara Parker Mars.
Welcome to Well, There You Go, a weekly discussion on books, hooks, and courts, where we give our views on reads, music, and wine. So let's get started with
Well, there you go.
And we are back, everyone. Welcome back. Today, again, we are giving you guys a little bit of something different. These are some things that we are kind of near and dear to our hearts, and we are allowing you a chair into our rooms as we discuss these topics. These are some of the things that we talk about offline, just chit-chatting, girls and that kind of thing. So we're offering you all a seat at the table as we discuss these things. Okay, so here in the room with me today is Miss Iris Bowling, USA best-selling author.
Hey.
Iris.
Hello,
and then
hello.
we have music and well, I don't know. This woman here has a lot of little accolades, so we just gonna say that our music extraordinaire, Miss Cara Parker, better known as Miss Prissy. Say hello and welcome.
Welcome.
Hello.
And I am your host for these shenanigans. I am Midnight Ace, and I am the CEO of Custom Creations, Lord. And I am also the book ambassador to the literary community. So guys, last week, you joined us last week, you know that we talked about the Black dollar and how significant it is and how we can do better in keeping our dollars more resources into our communities. And we left you with some few things you could do. Now, we know that we did not finish that, and we know that there is more, and you might have questions, and we're going to revisit some of those things again. So stay with us, guys. But this week, we found ourselves in a chatterbox, and we talked about something that is also in conjunction with what we talked about, and it is community. Okay, so guys, we're gonna Miss Iris is gonna start us off because we tackled this in a couple of different ways, but we're gonna have her start off because what she found out some information is actually I think it's really useful for you guys. So Miss Iris, we're gonna jump right in, guys, because we're ready to discuss this. So Iris, we're gonna talk about you and I had a conversation and we talked about community.
We talked about community, and let's connect it. Because I like connecting things. So last week we talked about the Black farmers, and and that thing, it really stuck with me. And one of these things that we said, we said, Miss Prissy actually said this. You know, when you work with a small business, a Black-owned small business, tell somebody about it, right? And we also talked about the fact that if you knew of Black farmers or Black businesses and stuff, to put it in our comment section so we could go back and we can look at some of those. But one question kept sticking with me. How do we get the Black community to come together and do things? Because at one time we really had strong Black communities everywhere. Miss Prissy was in New York. You was in Chicago. I was in Richmond. We had strong Black communities, and we started talking about what it was like when we was growing up, right? And we started with the most typical thing was about if you got in trouble, the neighbor that caught you whipped your behind right then and there. And then when you had to go home, they was gonna tell your well, mine was my big mom. They was gonna tell my big mom what I did, and then Big Mom was gonna whip your behind. And when Papa Ed came home, Big Mom was then gonna tell Papa about what happened, and then Papa was probably gonna whip your behind too. You know, we had community that looked out for everyone and every child, and every family had. If we had in our house, you gonna eat too. If you're across the street from us, next door to us, around the corner from us, don't matter. You and your children gonna eat too. And we had that community connection. And then we started talking. It's like right now, we don't even know our neighbors.
Right. And that's true. And I want to bring up
know our neighbors that's right, around us.
Immediately around us, right.
What happened to that? And what happened to that is another
I was going to say, let me point in. When we were growing up, and this is when we were growing up, guys, and we're not going to date ourselves, but this is when we were growing up, we had that. But let's kind of fast forward a little bit into our future, and even before we get to today, the big mamas and the grandmamas are younger now, and so they're starting families younger, and they do not have the life experience that our big mamas had. So they kind of up the grade, you know what I mean? They miss some stuff. And so rather than them going back, and I used to tell this to my kids too, when I was fortunate enough to have my elders with me, like my grandmother, my great grandmother, they told stories. And it was important for them to get the history, right? Because then you could carry that and move it forward with those traditions. But how likely was that to happen? So we're talking about communities as we know it, which was powerful, right? But we don't have that. So how do we instill that into the generations that are bringing up the young people now? How do you get them back to the sense of community now?
I think one of the things that's very important and relevant, I think conversations, and it starts at dinner time or just a gathering of family or friends or whatever, where you bring up those conversations. Remember then? Remember when? Or remember when I told you such and you those type of conversations lead
Miss Christie, that's good. But right now, I want y'all to really think about this question. How many people sit down at the dinner table, same time, every day, every other day, once a week?
Right. Well, that's why I said dinner table or gatherings, not necessarily, at dinner time.
Yeah, but no. I'm what I'm saying though. My point is, we as families don't do that anymore. It was a time that you knew dinner was at such time, and you was going to be at that table for dinner, right? Well, right now we don't do that because a lot of households. This one's working, that one's working, this one's on the internet, this one playing the game. Now I hear parents say, and what mothers or fathers or single homes or couples, they're saying no phone at the dinner table.
Right.
And I love when I hear that, because that means you got to interact with us. You can't be at the dinner table with your phones, checking this, checking that, da. That means that your attention is right here with family. And right now, that's coming more into play now, but we've lost a whole generation in between.
Yes.
Right. But here's another thing
in between.
So here's another way to combat, because we are so digital in our worlds, and not just our kids, we are too. Right. So remember how, and this is just so amazing to me, how we are, how we can combat things that happen with us. So everybody remembers COVID, right? And so COVID, you couldn't go to dinner. They suggested you not even have Thanksgiving dinner, which was crazy to me, with your families, right? Because that is probably the one time or the second time in the year that you get together with the families. But now we have Zoom. And Zoom, you can get it for free. The only downfall or the limits to that is that you can only talk for 45 minutes. So we could do that. I mean, we could also have, because Iris, how many times have we, you know, as an author to meet with some of your readers, you've picked a certain amount of people, you've done dinner with them. So we had a Zoom, you know, screen up, we had our dinner right here, and we've had dinner with you. So we can do it, but it's just not done in a traditional way. The traditional way, however, is always better because you can feel that person and you can touch that person. You know what I mean?
We can touch that person. We can hug that person. We could, you know, we can have real conversations that's going back and forth and back and forth. Even on Zoom, that is limited to a certain point. You can do it, but it's limited to a certain point. There's nothing like that feel of being at
face-to-face
Thanksgiving dinner, and everybody's talking at the same time. And then somebody, and I know y'all have experienced this, somebody says something that causes everybody to stop mid-fork, mid-spoon.
Because they didn't read the room. They didn't read the room.
I was kind of known for that.
Of course you were, Miss Person. That is not surprising. But there was that sense of family. It's a sense of family. But COVID showed us how we can get back to that. COVID, for all of its terrible things that was happening during COVID had some positive things. That came all out of it. It showed us how we can do things, how we can still do things, but it made us even more reliant on the internet, even more reliant on electronics, even more reliant, even coming down to our grocery delivery. You know, we call and we place our grocery order, and then, you know, you had to wash everything down and all that stuff, but it taught us that we could have our groceries delivered. It taught us we can have prepared food delivered. I mean, it taught us some things that, you know, not necessarily great. However, it did open the door, and it did show us how we can be more dependent on electronics,
which is not always good.
It's not always good.
I want to
we're talking about community. And do you guys remember we used to celebrate something called May Day? May Day was that day where we went to Murray Scott Elementary, had a playground. That's where we did our hula hoop contest. We did our hopscotch. We did hopscotch. We did four squares. I know I'm telling my age, but these are actual games that we did. We did the ball on the flagpole, when you hit the ball and it wraps around the pole and all that. I forgot what it's called. We did dodgeball. We did races. We did some of everything. That was a celebration that we did at the school, because once the school is closed for the summer, we still had the playground, so the community kids had somewhere to go.
Yes, and Simon Says was the biggest thing.
Simon Says,
you know, and then
Simon Says, Double Dutch, and Jacks.
And Jacks and marbles. Don't forget marbles.
Marbles.
And marbles, you know. And then they started closing down the after school programs. They started closing down certain community centers. They started closing down things. And then they wonder why kids stay on. At that time, it was Pac-Man. Y'all remember Atari and Pac-Man and all of that? You know, and in front of the TV, because you took everything else away. You know, they started.
Even the community centers too, like you know, the places that you had in your neighborhood, the Boys and Girls Clubs and stuff that was open. They took the funding away from it, and even though parents use that as a way to like have their kids in a safe zone, you maybe learn some, you know, to keep them from just sitting at home or whatever, getting into trouble or, you know, getting hurt. But then they made those things so expensive. So now you have a working family that's, maybe say middle income, and now they have to pay thousands upon thousands of dollars for the summer just for their kids to have some place to go before and after their work schedule.
Which means that most people couldn't afford that.
Right.
They couldn't
But
afford it.
what also made community centers a non, other than the funding, it became a non-safe zone when drugs really hit and everything, because people didn't feel safe to be have kids in the community center because of all the drug people that would hang outside or hang around and stuff. I grew up in the projects.
Miss Prissy, let's talk about that. Remember back in the 80s and 90s when all of a sudden we had this war on drugs that came about, and they started locking up mostly men, mostly Black men, and then they created these single family homes in Black communities automatically. It was a time when we had, let's go back even further. When we had Jim Crow, there was a time when we actually had manufacturing jobs that was here in this country, which gave us a way to make a little better earning. Then they shipped all the manufacturing jobs overseas because it was less expensive, which through those Black men and women who was working in the factories and stuff, it threw them out of jobs.
Yeah. That's true. I remember seeing how Detroit was desolated once manufacturing left. That was horrible.
Yes, it was. But the other part of it that is so crazy to me is, okay, guys, follow me on this, because I know there's an argument for both ways, pros and cons. But sometimes I can't help but feel that desegregation harmed us just as much as it helped some of us, because when we did desegregation, we got rid of Black schools. We got rid of, which means Black teachers was going to lose their jobs because white schools were not hiring Black teachers.
Right.
Talking about it. So when they desegregated us, they started busing us to these white better schools, which there is no question that the facilities at the white schools was better, but the psychological impact that those white schools put on Black children was terrible. Because we were still in the N-word stage, was flowing around, regularly from our white counterpart, our white children and their families, and the teachers. The teachers were not teaching our children, the history that our children needed to know, nor were they treating our children on the same level that they was treating some of the other children, And I think that as for all the good that desegregation did, because it did bring some gains for Black Americans, white women too. It brought more gains for white women than it did Black Americans, but that's a whole nother show, whole nother conversation.
Yeah, let's not get started on that one.
we're not gonna go there, because then we're gonna go into DEI and the whole. No.
Right.
So let's stay right here with the community. So it separated the community. Midnight and I was talking the other day, Miss Prissy, and we was talking about, okay, in my neighborhood in Washington Park, in Richmond, Washington Park, we had a vegetable truck that came through every weekend. We had
we had the meat man, we called him.
We had the milkman, believe it or not.
We had the milkman too. We had
and the people with the sodas come by with, to sell you the bottles of sodas, and you get so many bottles, you return those bottles and get this, So yeah, I remember that.
But let me tell you what I remember the most about the milkman. I love my brother.
A lot of babies got blamed on the milkman.
I love my brother. Oh, midnight, that's a whole nother side, but
I know we're not going. That's just a joke, a little insert here, but we're not gonna go there, right?
not so much a joke. But my brother, like in our house, we had buttermilk delivered, we had whole milk delivered. Where Turkey always liked chocolate milk. So he would go to the homes where the milkman would leave the chocolate milk because they would leave it right on your porch. They,
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
they never
yeah,
have- you know,
yeah.
they would just leave it on your porch. And he would take the people's chocolate milk
I can see that.
and he would bring it home for us. You know, but the milkman used to come. The at that time we actually cooked bread at home.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't buy bread.
bread.
We cooked bread at home. You know, and like it was a family across the street from us, and they could cook. Man, you talk about midnight. Remember we talked about the Friday night dinners? They would sell Friday night dinners. They would have the card game going on. They would sell the Friday night dinners at the card game and everything. That was community. That was all community. And somewhere along the line, we lost all of that. And it was done. I believe it was done strategically, and I think it was done purposely. Because they understood the strength of our communities. When our communities really came together, our communities were strong back during that time.
Yes.
With all of these things that they came through with desegregation. Then they came through when they started letting a certain amount of Black people buy homes out in the suburbs, what they call the suburbs. So that broke up the community anymore, and it diluted the strength. In my opinion, it diluted the strength of the Black community, and it was strategically done.
Well, that moving,
you know what?
moving.
I want to go ahead. It's funny that we had this topic today because last week after our show, I wasn't feeling well, so I was just floating, you know, on the channel, and I came across a movie on Netflix called Alice. And Keke Palmer and Common played in this movie. And I thought it was a back in slave time movie type of thing. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. But the gist of the movie was that Keke Palmer was Alice. Her family was still being treated as slaves, even though they were in the 70s when people was already free. And this was in Georgia. And it was this one white family that kept them tucked away and everything until she, you know, ran free after, you know, whatever happened. And I was like, how could you not blaming on them, but because they were, you know, they didn't know no better. They'd been on that one land or whatever, still doing the slave stuff. But
you know,
life is still going on.
That's a true story, Miss Prissy. I mean, I don't know. The premise of the story.
I think it was based on a true story.
Because there were some communities that didn't realize that slavery was. I'm not talking about slavery was over. They knew that they were so-called free, but they didn't feel like they had a choice in whether they could go away or whatever. You know, it's that mindset we talked about. You know,
at the cusp of everything that we will probably talk about in these subject matters is going to be mindset.
Yeah,
it's going to be mindset. So just like you said, with the desegregation being good and bad, which is good and bad in everything. But the thing is that when you have children that go to these schools and they are called treated these names and treated like less than, you can't help but think like, okay, am I? Because I am what they say, you know, and if you don't know your history and if you don't know from whence you came from, you can't move forward. So I remember this, and this is kind of off the subject. I remember growing up, there were a few things that we were not we were forbidden, all caps, to say. And that was, you're stupid, or you're ugly, or anything degrading to each other.
Degrading,
It
right.
was
Yep.
it was almost a heinous crime in our household. Now, obviously, when we went out, we we heard those things, we were called those things, but we were strong enough to know that those were words and that they couldn't help us. We knew that we were not stupid, we weren't ugly, we wasn't this. And
Right.
I think that helps. But when you have somebody like this, I'm assuming, I haven't seen the movie, but I'm assuming it was a safe zone for them. So how many women stay when a place where I'm gonna eat, my daughter is going to be fed, or whatever, you kind of you stay because you don't know any better. You don't know if there's something else out there for you. Again, mindset. You know what I'm saying? It's a mindset.
Another thing, and let's bring this conversation around to this, because we did talk about this also. We mentioned we talk about community. Well, we can't talk about Black communities without talking about the projects, because what people don't understand about the projects is back in the 1930s, the projects were not built for Black people. It wasn't even built for poor people. The projects was built to help the Depression with housing shortages during the Depression. It was that's the reason it was built, so that middle class families had a affordable place to live, right? That was the purpose of that. And then it became, as white people or families were able to get loans to get homes, Black people were not able to make that same thing. So and on top of that, they was going through neighborhoods and breaking up these neighborhoods for the sole purpose of progress. So they had to put highways through. They had to change the makeup of the traffic patterns, or whatever reasons they used to come in. They would always do it in what they call what they referred to later on as red line districts, because that played a role. So that when you went to get a loan or try to get a loan or anything, or have get a house or something like that, if you lived in a red line district, your credit was actually was impacted. You was rated lower because you lived in a red line district. So you couldn't get loans like some people could go to the bank. You saved a little money, and then you go into the bank, you want a loan to be able to build a house so that you can live in a better place. We weren't able to get those loans.
Yeah, and some of that is still going on. It's just not called
it's still going on.
Yeah.
But then we was forced to live in what they called the affordable houses, and now they're not taking care of those houses the way that they took care of them when it was meant for a little for middle class people. Now they're overcrowding them. They are they're not keeping up the maintenance on the properties the same way that they treated Black schools is the same way they started treating projects.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where it was Black people that was mostly living in those project areas. Then what happened? Then they decided the 90s with the war on drugs and stuff, and then it was like every project was being raided for one reason or another, which we still see happening today. But the difference in that,
did you see just a couple of weeks ago? Did you see in New York, in the Bronx, there was a building of the projects that collapsed because they said that the maintenance wasn't kept up on it. That something had deteriorated. Yes, it was. That was kind of like big news in New York for that. I mean,
let's go to what happened in Chicago. Was it Chicago where the Black Hawk landed on top of the building, the apartment building or project building or whatever it was, and they started immigration people, ICE people started pulling people out of their children and everything, and they had them in handcuffs in the middle of the night. You know, and those aren't the only things that happen. Even here, every time we turn around, we're seeing a raid taking place in one of the projects that is around here. And so they started treating people in projects as even second class citizens, even to us. And we did the same thing. If we were someone who was living in housing or a housing community or something like that, we looked down at people that was in the projects. You know, we did that too. So I think systemic things have been done to separate the strength of the Black community. You know, even if we take it back to slavery days, you had your field Negroes and then you had your house Negroes. And they separated you. The reason that they try to keep us separate is because when we come together as a strong Black community, we end up with Greenwood or Tulsa. But we're doing our own thing. We're doing our own banking.
And that's the key. They don't want us
to build our own
thing.
They don't want us to build our own. They keep telling us, oh, go build your own thing. Did y'all see this thing about the white community that tried to go out and build an all-white community? And they had ended up having to ask the government for help. Black people didn't get that. They didn't get to get help. Tulsa didn't get help from the government. Tulsa community came together and did their own thing. And it goes to show you when Black communities stop into fighting with each other, we come together. Girl, there is power in numbers.
That's but that's the same thing in Harlem. You know, Harlem was a strong Black community until they came and started all that, you know. Yeah.
Not reconstruction, what they call gentrification. Gentrification. They started coming and they do it and they break up. When they're doing that, they break up the Black community. Like right now, if you go down, you guys have been to my home a number of times. And whenever we go somewhere, one street that we go down is Brooklyn Park Boulevard. And Brooklyn Park Boulevard was a Black community kind of within itself. They had a bank that was on the corner. They had the barber shop on the corner. They had the hair shop on the corner. They had the pharmacy was right there in the corner. They had little stores in between there. Yeah. Even had the club, the Safari Club. Oh, chat. Yes. We were
but the thing I was going to say about the projects, like you had to, they were deemed bad, but you kind of had to know and see from whence they come from. You couldn't judge that book by its color. Every neighborhood, every community has some good and it has some bad, and that was the same with the projects. There were a lot of people that lived in the projects. Like one in particular for me in Chicago was Cabrini Green. And I got to go into, and people would forbid you to go in there because it was unsafe. But I went there because I had a cousin that lived in Cabrini Green. And so I would go there and I would spend some nights with her. And I got to know some of the people. Some of them wasn't all bad. Some of them was just trying to make it. You know, they were like, you know, families was living in there. They was using that reduced income so that they could send their kids to school, so that their kids could get out of the neighborhood, right? And that's what we do. We better ourselves and then we move out. But it would be nice if we could better ourselves and then come back and give back to the community. That's important. However, that is not always received very well. Like, let's just say it's not always received very well.
But let's stay right there on that, Midnight, because you have a very unique look into this topic because your grandparents all had homes in the neighborhood. You was taking care of your grandparents in one of those homes and your father's home, right? And the thing that we tend to do is we don't keep up property. We don't keep up Big Mon's house. You know, and as soon as somebody come through there and say, "Oh, we're gonna give you $25,000 if you sell us a house, you don't have to do nothing to it. We're gonna
That
take
happened
care
to my
of it.
family.
Blah 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 blah. You don't have to do anything. You can just take the money, go do what you want to do. What they don't realize is that $25,000 is going to turn into $150,000, $250,000
Yes.
for that
Oh, for
person that you're
sure.
selling their house to. But Midnight, you kept your houses. You kept
Yeah.
Eddie's house. You know, and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
You kept it in the family because that
I
is
mean, because
wealth.
that's wealth, and I get harassed. I'm gonna say harassed because I don't know how many times I've said no, I didn't want to sell, but I keep getting the letters, I keep getting the phone calls about it, and they have changed that community now. And so I was gonna say I'm gonna go back, and then we're gonna come back to this too. But what happens is that a group of people feels like the neighborhood is going to be good for people, whether it be in doctors or, you know, trainees or just people in general who wants that piece of land because it's close to something else.
Something
right?
else, right.
And so I was just going to say, we'll go back to Cabrini Green. They wanted that area. I don't know the entire, all of the history about it, but they wanted that land. So they moved, they what do you call it? They moved the people to different areas.
Relocated.
They relocated them. But when they relocated them, they had to find places for them because if you know Cabrini Green, it had tons and tons of apartments. It had like 3 buildings in there. It had row houses and everything. So those were a lot of families that they had to relocate. So they put them in the suburbs where all of the high income people went to, right? But now for some reason, it's a little bit farther away. It's inconvenient for them to get to their jobs downtown. So they want them to come back to the city so that they can have easy access to that. So they relocated all of those people out there to the suburbs. So that's how we got to the suburbs, because they offered us something new. And then they offered those people not apartment buildings or, you know, projects. They offered them homes. They gave them the money, the homes, but in some of those cases, they lent the people the money that they couldn't really pay back with terms and conditions that they couldn't come back. So even though you gave me, you know, the glory, now I can't keep it up. So now I'm homeless, basically, you know, or I have to move back in. But going back to the houses, you're right, Iris. A lot of times when you lose your elders, you know, older kids are already, they have their own homes, they have their own lives. Some of them don't even live in the same state anymore. So it's difficult to keep up a house. And then you have that, I just want the money kind of thing, you know, and then they sell it and just to be done with it. Now, there is things like, you know, obviously my brother and I was the last of the Mohegans, actually. And my brother and I are very close. And that means a lot because we didn't fight about anything. We always talked about it, right? So we had a good understanding. We both decided to keep the house. We're both owners of the house. And the thing is that we both have our own houses. So it becomes, now you have to put somebody in the house because, you know, they had the thing with the squatters and that was harder to get rid of. So it's a lot of things to upkeep it, but it's worth it in the end.
It is
because
worth it,
you never know. You never know when you might have to go back to that, right? And so now what I'm thinking is, you know, like we have children who have their own places. We wish we could just get them all together and just in that, because then now that's a resource. You don't have to, all your resources is not spread out. You know what I'm saying? So you have to think about that too, in terms of, you know, the real wealth is sharing the resources, getting one source stronger, getting that one out, getting the other one, you know, everybody like lifting while climbing, right? So I got you separate. Okay, now we got to put back in. I started something with my kids long ago. It kind of worked, but I couldn't just reinforce it. So I have 4 boys. And my thought process was when the older ones, that they would always, you know, bring up or assist with the younger ones. whether it be in financial, mentally, or anything, because you want to have Black men raising Black men. So they had to be positive. So they had to show positive things. It kind of worked. I even said that when my youngest ones come up, y'all gonna have to, spend money on college. Y'all gonna help bring this one through the college. You know what I mean? That part didn't work, but you know what I'm saying? I tried to keep it in a community where if there was any outside forces, those boys would be strong enough to cover each other if something were to attack them from the outside. Right.
That's the general thought pattern of strong communities. What you just talked about, because at one time it wasn't just about the boys in your family. It was about all of the kids in the neighborhood, making sure that everybody had that strong connection with each other, but the problem is we don't have that now. Sometimes not even with family members, we don't, because everybody is so far away. That's number one. But even the ones that are right here together, we're texting each other. We're not getting on the phone and calling. And
we're not visiting like once a week on that Sunday.
Sunday dinner was everybody come to one location for Sunday dinner, right? Or the Friday night card games. Anyway. But we all came together, as a community, and what I think would be important is let's make a conscious effort to start doing that again. We came together. Here's an example. Remember, you guys know the Target boycott, and we came together as a Black community to say, hey, we're going to do something to get these people to respect us, not just our dollars, but to respect us a little bit more. And even as a people, we fought about that. Right? We fought about that. We're fighting about it now because one group of people say, well, the Target boycott is over. And the other group of people say, oh, hell no, it's not.
Yeah, right.
And it's not until you make policy changes as far as you hiring us, you supporting us. I think it's great that some of these places said, well, we're going to support HBCUs. Everybody that you hurt by your actions is not college people.
Right.
A good portion of them probably are. And if they are college people, they're not necessarily HBCUs. You understand what I'm saying? So to me, Target hasn't done anything to want me to go back into Targets right now. But even with that, guys, as clear cut as that was, we could not come together as a people and say, this thing that you did harmed us simply because of the color of our skin, right? And come together and say, we're going to confront you on this. We could not come together for that. So now the question is, okay, we may not have been able to come together on that big thing. Let's take it in small pieces then. Let's take it within our community. I don't care what community you live in, somewhere along the line, there's a community meeting. There's a community meeting. What a great place to learn who your neighbors are. You know what I'm saying? How can we start? Here's my question. I'm going to try to get it to a point where it's clear of what I'm asking. How can we start in our own family and in our own community to start building stronger foundations? How do we go about doing that?
Well, I think block clubs, so the block that I grew up on, even though all of the elders are gone, there's still a sense of community there on the block. It's not as strong as it used to be, But there are some people, like I do know the family or the person that my father passed the torch to is still living over there in the neighborhood. And she regularly has like these meetings at the police department, and they talk about safe zones and where to stay, what's happening and everything. Those are the places where they talk about their concerns. And that's a place where the alderman goes in and find out things that is necessary for the community. They get grants and stuff like that. And they do let every family know. They kind of go down the block, pass out flyers or whatever. So they still have that. And that is something that is something that's just unique. I mean, you don't take that much. I mean, if you go to your community and you talk to your police department, you can even have those meetings there. Like they're like the watch meetings or whatever.
In the community where you can have those meetings at churches,
Yes.
or there
At
may
churches,
be a library in your community where they will allow you to meet at libraries and things
Yeah,
like that.
I was going to say libraries too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can just
meetings
find
at
out,
the library.
what's going on, some of the struggles of your neighbors, and see how you can help.
Your neighbors' names.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Because some of us, I'm gonna be honest with you. Some of my neighbors, I know them when I see them, but I don't know their names. I know their car when I see their car, but I don't know their names.
Well,
so
I can
I'm
say
bad with-
that I know
I'm
my
like
neighbors.
that.
yeah.
I know my
What you
neighbors. If we was to go away or something, I can call my neighbor across the
Miss
street.
Chrissy, Miss
or the
Chrissy,
one-
Miss
what?
Chrissy. What kind of community are you in?
Gated community.
You're in a gated community.
I
Yeah.
don't know what you to say.
Yeah, but
It's-
it's
It's
but
easy. It's
say
easy in the
that
gated.
it's easier in a gated community, because in a gated
Well, I
community,
was going to say this. This is a thing when you was talking about how people, because I grew up in New York and I grew up in the Bronx.
Right.
Where my aunt lived, y'all know when I said my aunt, I only got one left. So her building is like that. Like they a community. She lives in her building. She lived there for 40-something years. Her kids are grown and everything. She in a 3-bedroom apartment with just her and her dog. And she's not doing all that great. But that building, the community of the people in that building on that block, from the bodega across the street, they look out for her.
Okay.
and it's a bodega across the street. I love that, Miss Prissy. Just getting off topic just for a little bit. I love the idea of being able to live right here, and I come downstairs or go right across the street or around the corner and just grab a hot cup of tea or a cup of coffee and sit down and just talk to people, give me a bagel. I love that. That's
Right.
one thing that I loved about certain neighborhoods in New York. You could always just go downstairs and do whatever, and I love that.
And you can find the real happenings of the neighborhood, because you got everybody.
Yeah.
They got their finger on the pulse. And I think that is true too with the neighborhoods in having that close proximity, or even just knowing your neighbors. Now, where I live, I cannot honestly say that I know all of my neighbors. I do, like you, Iris. I know them when I see them. I know where they live. I can attach them to their houses, but I don't know their names. Some of them, I don't know if they have kids or not. But one thing that would be helpful, though, is because we do have a lot of dogs in our neighborhood. And a lot of times these dogs are running around, and I'd be like, I don't want to take them in, but I wish I knew where the dogs do know, cats know, but I wish I knew where they was so I could get them back to their owners, but I don't know.
Right.
But I think if we're leaving our audience with a task, right? I think I would say get to know your neighbors. If it's not the whole block, at least the ones that are, conjunction with where your house is, like obviously your next neighbor across the street or something like that. I think I know my next door neighbor, and I know the family across from us. And I will say, though, sometimes when there are opportunities where you can get remember when we had the floods and stuff like that, there were places in the community that was giving out the little buckets of the cleaning supplies so that you can kind of clean out your stuff like that. We may not always know that. Me, I don't. My husband might, but our neighbors would say, hey, don't forget such and such time. You can go over to such and such area. You can get the buckets. You know, they're giving out one. If I can get two, I'll get you one. Or sometimes if they get an abundance and stuff, even like the food pantry sometimes, they would just give out to the neighborhood. And I might not always know it because I work every day. But it's a neighbor that's going to knock on our door and say, hey, I got extra onions. Do you need extra onions and stuff? So we do have that sense.
I've done that.
In my little
you have
circle.
to do that with in your community if you can.
Yeah.
I work with AARP, and they have, where they are, we have a food pantry. And sometimes they have stuff like produce and stuff that they can't keep for so long. And if the pantry has done all they're giving out, then they trying to figure out what to do with the leftover stuff. When I tell you I had a 5-pound box of red bell peppers and had no clue what to do with them.
Girl.
You cut them up and freeze them.
But I
didn't even have that much room in my freezer to put more than 6.
Oh wow.
But my neighbor across the street, Tim has both of us garden. Well, last season, Tim had an abundance of tomatoes really growing. I had an abundance of peppers, green peppers, really growing at one time. And potatoes. So we said, okay, you give me some of your tomatoes, I'm gonna send you some potatoes or cucumbers, because I had peppers and cucumbers just as soon as almost I took one off, another one was growing in this place. He had that like that with tomatoes. So we could exchange them. But here's my question. And Midnight, I like your thing for a call to action, but here's my question. If something was to happen to your house, Lord forbid, a fire, would one of your neighbors come and wrap a blanket around you and sit you in their house until things got some type of order come to things? Because when things like that's happening, it's all over the place.
Yes.
Will your neighbor, do you have a neighbor that will come and wrap you around, blanket around you and say, sit here until we can get things settled?
Yep. And I have those that I will have, and I have those that I would do for as well.
Yeah.
Now I have those that I would.
I have those that they've done it for me, and I've done it for them. My neighbor, she had domestic stuff going on with her kid. He was threatening her and everything. So I had her in my house safe until her husband came home. And vice versa. When I was pregnant, we had an ice storm. Power was down, and my kids were still small. She took me and my 2 boys in. So yeah, it's good to have that type of neighbor.
That's why it's important to know that's another reason why it's important to know your neighbors too. Like my neighbor Tim has Chris's cell phone number. So if anything hop off with me at my house, I know Tim and Gwen can reach Chris. You know what I'm saying? Because I live alone. Well, actually, I live with Roxy, but Roxy owns the house. But the thing about it is you should get to know your neighbors, and for no other reason than for things like that, for emergencies, when emergencies come around. And the thing about it is make sure that you're that kind of neighbor where you can be a provider when those things come around,
Right.
I think there's a couple of really good call to actions that we can leave our listening audience with. One that one thing I want to say is don't be so quick to sell Big Mama's house. We have to think about what they went through in order to get that
Keep the
home.
house, yes.
Yeah.
They would listen. If you were fortunate enough to grow up, listen, y'all. I was born in 58. Go, y'all calculate all you want. I was born in 58. I was living with my grandmother. We lived in a neighborhood with houses and backyards and front yards. We had streets that we could take a chalk and do our hopscotch line on, or take a chalk and put the 4 squares on there so we could play 4 squares in the middle of the street. You know, we had the street lights that went off at a certain time because you know you better be in the house before those street lights come on, right? I grew up in that type of community, and it's so important that we understand the sacrifice that Papa Ed and Big Mom went through in order to buy that house, because it was not easy back in that time, you know. And then at that time you had house and you had land, you know, around that house. So the house may fail, but you know what never fails is that land.
But
Right.
but the
I
question
think
too becomes,
regardless
I
of-
So that's how
I was
they
just going to
tried
say
to
is
build- they tried to start that generational wealth, because we wasn't gonna get it in other ways that some other races get it. You know, this was our way of starting that generational wealth. And if I didn't learn anything else from Big Mom, I learned the importance of having your own, owning your own home.
But I think community, when we talk about community, I didn't I grew up in the projects, but my grandmother lived in Queens. She had a house. My father lived down south. He had a house. Well, he had a trailer before he had his house. But my point is, you could be a community in projects, not just because you live in the projects, right? And I remember my mother telling me one
Community
time,
anywhere.
I was doing something I ain't had no business doing. She was like, let me tell you something. Just because we living in this projects, you are not going to have no project mentality. She told me just like that. She said, what all of these people do, that group, you know, in here, that don't mean you have to follow suit, because that's not how you was raised and who you are.
So Midnight, that let us know that Miss Prissy is exactly still the same. She's doing things that she knows she ain't got no business doing.
So we're talking about community right here.
Look, so we can take the girls out the project, but we can't take the project out the girl.
This is our community. This is our community.
My point about community, let's get back on track, ladies, is that even when I was doing something wrong, and like you said, your neighbors see, or, you know, and everything. I mean, I used to get in trouble a lot. So here's how my community worked. My mother was strict. If I wasn't in that house by a certain time, she's coming out with her belt, her extension cord, whatever. She come looking for me. And I could be in the jam in the park, and they announce, Shorty Dukes, your mom's looking for you. So that gives me the notification.
You got to run home.
That's family. That's community. That's community.
Like, that is community. That is community. I was going to say too, like, we grew up on the block. We had a lady. I would never forget her. Her name was Miss Preston. God rest her soul. Miss Preston did not play, honey. When I tell you she was a hood grandma, she was a hood grandma. But her job was to sit in that window from 8 to faint, and she would watch all of us and the parents that was working. She had telephone numbers, speed dial to their jobs. And the moment we stepped out of line, we wasn't where we were supposed to be. She would call. Obviously, if we really got out of hand, she would come out of her house. We had the authority to chastise us in ways she saw fit. And then, of course, she, told the parents, and then we got in trouble again. Now, I want to say, growing up, I couldn't stand Miss Preston. I loved her. Literally, I loved her. But I was just like, oh, my God. And we would be like, Miss Preston in the window. We got to go around the corner. How are we going to sneak away from Miss Preston? But when I say now that I'm an adult,
You
I
appreciate
wish
Miss
we had
Preston.
more Miss Prestons because our kids wouldn't be getting snatched up. They wouldn't be getting into all of that mischief that'll send them away to jail for, for years and years. I mean, that was community. But again, like I said, our generation
Miss
was Miss
Elsie,
who?
Miss Elsie, she lived next door to our house. She was 809, she was 811. She lived next door to us. And every time we think we done did something, girl, we done got away with it. We get to the house and Big Mom said, yeah, Miss Elsie called me. And we was like,
oh my God.
She done called again.
Yeah. But I will say though, she was the lookout, right? And we needed that because a lot of our parents worked and everybody couldn't afford babysitters. So we were latchkey kids, but we still had somebody really basically watching out for us. Right. But we also had people that worked for like a bread company. We had people and actually the lookout woman, her husband was a butcher. And we had somebody that worked for a Little Debbie company. We had people who worked in certain areas, and then they would bring home like the bread that they were gonna be, be outdated. They bring that bread home, and they would drop off, to the house and stuff like that. I enjoyed that. We do still on the block. We do have the one who worked for Little Debbie's. We still he doesn't work for Little Debbie's anymore, I don't think. But my son is in the family home, and he says it's quite often the guy drops off stuff. I don't know, maybe he's getting it from the food pantry or whatever, but he still brings the doorbell and drop the food off. So I think I still feel like the block I grew up on still has that sense of community, even though it's not as strong as it used to be. But when we move away, those are things we should take to our communities. And if they're not there, start them, or act accordingly so people will follow suit.
Right.
I agree. Yes. And I agree that getting to know at least one neighbor good enough to share your at least a phone number or contact information. Mm-hmm. So if anything happened and no one else is around, they have, a contact and somebody comes like, I try to reach, I call the number, something. I mean, I know they have wellness checks, but
last time when we did our action, we asked people to share Black businesses, Black farmers, Black any type of business, so that we can put them out there as well. And we talked about the strength of the Black dollar, and the Black dollar is strong. It's just that we don't keep it within our community. And the thing that hit me was that we don't have the kind of communities that we had at one time. So now we have to take steps to start rebuilding our communities, to a strength, to get them strength within your community. Because I will tell you this, when it comes time to put people in office that's going to represent your community, you want to make sure that you're putting the right people in there. And you want to be able to make sure that everyone in the community is represented by that person. So building strong communities is not just for the safety of your children. It's not just for the safety of your home. It's also to bring together that strength, because there is power in numbers. And I have seen communities that have gotten together and protested against something, and they stopped that thing from happening in that community. The only way you can do that is if you know your community, if you build strong communities to stop them from being able to do things to your community. So that is my call to action from this. And we are over time again. But this is my call to action, is get to know your community. Even if you just start in your block, get to know your next door neighbor, get to know the people that live across the street from you, get to know your community. If they have any community meetings about neighborhood watch meetings or this kind of meeting or that kind of meeting, try to go to one of them so that you can see the neighbors that don't necessarily live next door or across the street, but they might live behind you or around the corner from you, or something like that. So my call to action is to introduce yourself to your community. That's my call to action. What's yours, Miss Prissy?
Something along the same lines. I think when I think of community, like I said, I live in a gated community, and we have, the association and all of that. I really don't attend a lot of those things, not because of any particular. The time that they have it is usually a time that I'm busy doing something else. But I would say find a time to find something in your area or your community to, like you said, to get to know everybody. But you remember how we used to have block parties and things like that? Do something like that to bring
those Friday night fish fries. Those Friday night
fish fries, rent parties, whatever it may be.
I remember those.
Yeah, those rent parties. Yeah.
To bring people together. I most of my friends are older than me, and I work with elder people as well. And one thing that I try to do with my little work community is to offer to do something for them, because you never know, just little stuff, nothing big.
Yeah.
And that's another way you can get to know, like when we first moved here, we didn't know nobody.
Right.
Our neighbor helped us shovel out. They had the snow blower. And our kids were still small, so they couldn't even do nothing with a shovel, and stuff like that. So when I say, help your neighbor, if you see somebody that might need some help or assistance with something, that, can go a long way to your neighborhood. So that's what I mean by,
What about Midnight?
I feel like those things are a good way to start. Definitely getting to know the neighbors, and also kind of tapping into what's going on in your community, and just finding resources that you might not know about too, because they could help you or they could help somebody else. So definitely get to know the footprint of the neighborhood and who's in it, what they're doing, and that kind of thing. Because you just don't know. And I think you'll need that if something were right now. It's kind of more immediate. It's not something that you can think about. It's kind of needed like right now, because you don't know what's going to be going on.
Exactly. We don't know what's happening.
We may have to turn to our neighbors, not just for help, but to help them also.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so we have to keep that in mind. Midnight, you had no control of this conversation from the first time we started, because now it's over.
It's over. But I am gonna say, guys, we can just to close this out, but we can all be found on our social media platforms. Make sure make sure that you follow this. If you've tapped in or anytime, make sure you follow us. We're going to be putting some clips on this on our YouTube channels, but we do have an actual podcast that you can follow and get all episodes that are archived on there. So please do that. We're going to come back next week, but I think we're going to go back to we're gonna bring the tone down a little bit, and we're gonna actually talk about a book. So we won't say which one we're gonna talk about, because we gotta figure it out ourselves. But we're gonna have a story for you next week, just to kind of bring the tone down. We've given you a lot of information. We want you to absorb it. So next time when you come back, we'll have like a little story, not too heavy, but maybe a little funny. And then we're going to bring you back, though, to community, because this is near and dear. But we're going to say follow us, and we're going to say bye-bye for now. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.
See you
And
next
I'll
time.
say,
Well,
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 there
there
you go.
there you go.
we still don't have it
Yeah,
together. We
boy.
still need John
Not in
to
sync
sync
with
us.
that.
to sync us. Bye, everybody.